all that, though, let's get in the headlines now with Nine radio broadcaster, host of Overnights, Michael McLaren. Michael, as always, terrific to have you on the show. This police speak, by God, I hate it. I can pick it a mile off, having been a bit of a practitioner in the past. Our position hasn't changed. The same phrase over and over from the government in the last few days. That's not the same as ruling out any change in the future. I don't think we're ever going to see these tax cuts. They're 2 years away. They refuse to rule out change. What's your view?
Well, I suspect you're right. I think your summary earlier, Peter, said everything. All I want to do is re-emphasise one point, and that is that this isn't necessarily, despite some of the spin, a massive tax break for the rich to the exclusion of all others, as if stage 1 and stage 2 were irrelevant to stage 3. This will affect people, in a beneficial sense, earning as little as $45,000 a year. And if families who pull in, say, $140,000, $150,000 are considered wealthy, well, that would be news to many of them with a mortgage. So Labor have to be very careful here. They campaigned and won on a cost of living campaign, didn't they? Well, petrol prices are going up, as we just heard there. Energy prices probably up another 30% in 12 months. Wouldn't be a surprise. If they take the tax cuts away in 2 years, well, that only makes the cost of living situation even more detrimental to the average Australian.
Yeah, the timing is that if they're going to take them away, they take them this budget or next budget. They wouldn't take them right up against the next election. So I would be on notice next year, Australia, that they could disappear. Let's talk about another aspect which we will see in the budget. Budget, of course, is due in a fortnight's time. And this is the use of mass immigration as a growth inflator to the bottom line. I know you look at this as closely as I do. Today we saw an announcement of some visa fixes, a whole way to bring in more people. The cap has been lifted. We're talking about 200,000 more immigrants into Australia. They're going to lower things in terms of English competency, experience, qualifications, all which were required in the past. Now, this isn't about making us richer per person, the per capita test. It might boost the GDP numbers, Michael, but this is a Ponzi scheme because ordinary Australians are actually going to go backwards at a time when our mortgages are going up, and the one thing that keeps us being able to pay off our mortgage is job security.
Well, that's right. Again, going back to the last election, we were told that if Labor won, wages would go up. Well, here's one way of making sure that doesn't happen. Flood the market with more workers. And of course, this is the prime example, isn't it, Peter, of the worst possible situation where you go for quantity, not quality. And Australia have done this in the past. We've certainly gone for quantity, but there was a higher level of quality associated with it. We're getting rid of the latter. I think it's madness. I understand why big business are in favour. Every new migrant is a new customer. Good luck to business. It also puts downward pressure on wage. Again, good luck to business. But government shouldn't be beholden just to business or just to unions or just to any group. They've got to govern in the national interest. And I don't think too many Australians, if asked about this, would think this would be a good policy, which should be a pretty good test as to whether the government should do it or not.
Hey, the Teals, one of the criticisms I had at the last election federally, there wasn't much behind the Teals. We didn't know where they would stand on issues like defence, a lot of the issues in the social portfolio. They were all about, integrity and a couple of other things. But that is it. They're trying it on again now at the state election coming up in Victoria in November, the March New South Wales state election. All they're saying that they're running on now is overdevelopment. Well, I could win a seat on overdevelopment if that's all I'm going to run on. Like, everyone's a bit of a NIMBY when it comes to their neighbourhood. How can we ensure that there's more scrutiny on these Teals? Because when they get into power, it's very, very different than what they say before the election.
Well, it is. One thing we should do is make sure that the wannabe state Teals have a conversation with the now official federal Teals about what we just spoke about, immigration. What's their position on having 195,000 people turn up per annum minimum? Because they've got to live somewhere. And if you're campaigning on not having an apartment building put up next door, or you don't want some of those 150-year-old gums cut down in your nice Wahroonga street, I'm for you. I'm with you. Good luck to you. But if at the federal level, where they control immigration, they're going to wave this one through the House, those people got to live somewhere. And chances are they're going to live in your city, Peter, of Melbourne, and mine of Sydney. And if these teals say, well, not in my backyard, that's not good enough. So you've got to have a coherent policy. We haven't had it, you know this, we haven't had it really ever, I don't think, on immigration. But these are all these different parts now coming together. And it would be good if they sort of, from Brand Teal's point of view, worked out between the two levels where they sat on this issue.
The Victorian Libs running behind the Premier Daniel Andrews. If you believe the published polls, he looks likely to get back in November. So they've got to be bold if they're going to cut through. This is a bold policy. Over the weekend, the opposition leader released a policy that says you won't pay more than $2 a day for public transport in Victoria. Now, if you compare it to the cap in New South Wales, the cap there's $50 a week. What's that, $16.80 a day? That's the most you'll pay in New South Wales on transport. Victoria's going to go down to $2 a day. Now, I have to say, I give him credit for shaking things up on this. Michael, what do you think?
Well, look, I'm not against it. I don't think, Peter, you would know better than me, but I suspect in all of our big cities, public transport runs at a loss. And so the question here is, how big a loss are you willing to carry in the broader budget? But on the other hand, if you are trying to get people out of cars, which seems to be the national religion or sport at the moment, and onto public transport, well, you've got to incentivise them. And one way to do it, or the most obvious way to do it, is to make the existing network cheaper than it currently is. Now, I've seen some critics of this, and they make a valid point that out in the outer burbs, the public transport is either very slim or non-existent. Well, that's true. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have higher fees where it does exist to build the infrastructure. You can find money elsewhere in the budget. Governments aren't good at that, but you can do it.
Yeah, I think it's. I think he's got to take the fight up to the government. I think it's a good policy, and we'll see how it goes. Michael McLaren, thank you.